As we begin week one, I want to spend some time with you walking through a series of slides that provide a context for the readings throughout the semester. This presentation will be broken into a number of subsections, but throughout the presentation, I will discuss the major policy themes that undergird the current conversation on higher education, policy themes that will be repeated throughout the semester as you move through the assigned readings. So as we look to this first slide, what I want to draw your attention to on the first slide are the long-standing public purposes of American higher education. From our roots in the Morrill Act to the work that was done post-World War II through the GI Bill, to the advent of the community colleges, to the growth and proliferation of regional institutions, to the true massification of higher education in the 2000s, from my perspective, these broad public purposes have remained constant. So while presidents have changed, governors have changed, systems heads have changed, systems have been born, adjusted, altered, refined, these items have remained constant. These items are my perspective on the public purposes of higher education. So the first is access. That institutions provide access opportunities to ensure that students have the chance to realize their dreams, and that post-secondary education is the vehicle for the transformation of American society. That vehicle is the set of institutions, 2-year, 4-year, public, private, that comprise the nation's post-secondary system. Second long-standing public purpose is that of equity, that through our nation's system of institutions, long-standing barriers to participation should be removed. These barriers were removed at the federal level in Brown v. Board of Education, the subsequent Civil Rights Act of 1964. Here in the state of Tennessee, the proceedings that shaped the implementation of the Geyer Court case that defined higher education in our state from the late 60s until the early 2000s. As we are moving into an election season with a critical conversation about equity, inclusiveness, diversity, etc., this goal of equity has been and continues to be one of the significant and signal public purposes of the Academy. The third is affordability. As you track the system and policy trends over time, I referenced the GI Bill, the advent of the Pell Grants, more recently broad-based lottery scholarships, or here in the state of Tennessee, the Promise Program. All of those are public investments in the Academy to ensure that our institutions remain affordable. And you see that diversity of federal, state, and institutional aid packages coming together to promote that broad goal of affordability for our nation's post-secondary systems. The fourth is the goal of quality, that students should have the highest quality educational system afforded to them. That's quality from a systems perspective, from an institutional perspective, and from an individual course perspective. But that focus on quality undergirds the nation's system, and it's that focus of quality that you will see as a repeating theme as we move later into the semester with conversations about performance funding. The next is public service. Going back to the land-grant mission, our institutions were created to make a difference in the lives of the people in their service areas. Here at East Tennessee State University, we were founded in 1911 for a singular purpose, to improve the quality of life for the people of our region. That mission of service, that mission of outreach, is part of the three-legged stool, teaching, research, and service, and it's one of the foundational public purposes of the Academy. And then something that has evolved from the 50s forward is the focus on research and economic development. That institutions, be they land-grant institutions, major research institutions, universities such as ETSU, community colleges, or the TCATs, all of those institutions as a system of post-secondary universities, colleges, etc., have a responsibility to drive research and economic development, either through the creative process, through the entrepreneurial process, or through working with business and industry to meet the needs of local service areas. But those are the broad public purposes of higher education, and they're public purposes from my perspective that have been constant since the foundation of public universities more than 2 centuries ago. As we transition into the new millennium, we are witnessing changing expectations for the nation's post-secondary system. I want to take these changing expectations back a few years, however, and point to The Nation at Risk, a report that came out during the Reagan administration. The Nation at Risk was a clarion call for educators to examine quality. What that report, that seminal report, indicated is that the nation's secondary system of institutions, K through 12, was failing the country. and unless we raised the bar, held our secondary systems accountable, that future generations of Americans would fall behind in an internationally competitive global economy. That mindset of accountability, outcomes, the pressure from a public perspective that was focused on the secondary system through the nation at risk, over the course of the past 35 years, has found its way to our system, the post-secondary system of institutions in the state of Tennessee and across the nation. During the 2000s, a group led by Pat Callan, the National Center for Public Policy Studies, produced reports called Measuring Up, which provided grades to states A through F on their ability to meet access, affordability, and other elements that were contained within the report card in their documents. If you have some spare time, go out on the web and do a Google search for Measuring Up reports. I remember when I was at THEC working for Dr. Rhoda when this report first came out. The state received an F in the affordability grade, and we spent a significant amount of time at a staff level digesting the report, analyzing the metrics, and trying to really respond publicly to how we as a state received a failing grade. What Measuring Up did from my perspective is to change the focus away from institutions towards states. Pat Callan, the director of the center, quite often would ask the question, how are institutions serving the broad needs of states rather than how are states serving the needs of institutions? And that was a critical question because for the better part of 30, 40 years, the focus was always how can states, how can legislators, how can governors meet the needs of institutions, meet the needs of ETSU, MTSU, University of Tennessee at Knoxville, etc. Callan flipped that equation, saying how can those institutions help make the states that they're based in better places to live? That flipping of the equation has remained constant and is now a central question that's asked with great frequency in the halls of legislatures across the nation. How are universities, community colleges, and technical institutes serving the needs of the people for whom investments are made in the form of tax dollars? You then see a broad series of reports from the College Board. You're all familiar with the U.S. News & World Reports rankings. Despite their flaws, that's what students and parents turn to when they're making decisions on where to invest their scarce resources in the future of their children from an educational perspective. Some of the other items on this chart, National Council of State Legislatures, National Governors Association, and other entities have all jumped onto the bandwagon of examining higher education and recognizing that higher education is the vehicle through which economic development will occur. Much of the work in Tennessee from the Drive to 55 perspective traces its roots to work done by the National Governors Association in the early 2000s when the then chair of the NGA, Joe Manchin, decided to make college completion his centerpiece agenda as chair of the NGA. I was on the governor's staff at the time, and I recall vividly when I received a call from the governor asking me to come to his office. I had no idea what he wanted to talk to me about, but when I walked in, there was Travis Rendell and a group of others from the National Governors Association. He said, "Brian, have a seat. I want to share with you what I just shared with the group here. I want to make college completion my hallmark agenda as chair of the National Governors Association." That was a moment when I sat in my seat and slumped a little bit because I realized my job was going to get a little bit more difficult. But all kidding aside, from Governor Manchin to Governor Haslam to governors across the country, they are all focusing on completion because they recognize the critical role that it plays in driving a state's economy. Complete College America is now a think tank helping to drive a lot of that agenda work. And then finally, Gates, Lumina, and other foundations are making their investments in elements that drive that public policy agenda of enhancing the educational attainment level for our nation. In the past, you looked to foundations to seed your ideas. Now foundations look to you to drive their agendas. Once again, all part of the signal shift that occurred as a result of, from my perspective, the publication of A Nation at Risk. I want to step back and talk some about a chart here that contrasts the public policy challenges facing the nation in 2016 and the public policy challenges facing the nation's system of higher education in 2008. In the assigned readings for next week's portion of the course, you have the ASCII report from 2015. This slide provides a highlight of that assigned reading, outlining the public policy challenges as defined by the American Association of State Colleges and Universities for 15-16 and what they defined as the public policy challenges for the 7-8 academic year. And what's striking to me is the parallel and similar nature of issues from 8 to 16. 2008, as you'll recall, was at the height of the Great Recession. So at the height of the Great Recession, college affordability was the number one issue on their radar screen. 2016, it remains the number one issue. State financial forecast was number two. If you look down within the elements there in 16, I would say that aligns with state economic needs at number four. But as you look from campus security, guns on campus, the 2008 election cycle, I guarantee you when they put out the report for this fall, the 2016 election cycle will be on that list. But a striking similarity across those two sets of lists, height of recession, post-recession, which really underscores for me the stability of the challenges facing our nation's system, a stability around access, affordability, and quality. So this is simply a frame for which you can digest that reading material next week, but it's also a frame, from my perspective, that defines the stability of the issues facing our institutions and facing you in your respective roles on your campuses. I'm going to pause for a second before diving into the next section of the PowerPoint. So I look forward to moving through the next section of material with you in a subsequent video.